Hello, my name is Nafisa, and today we're going to explore the spatial dynamics of crime in New York City. Urban crime's complexity affects community safety and quality of life, demanding a nuanced understanding of its socioeconomic, environmental, and spatial drivers. Research highlights the need for detailed analysis to improve public resource allocation, urban planning, and law enforcement. The study examines the spatial interplay between public parks, adult homelessness, and crime in New York City, aiming to inform more effective urban and public safety strategies. For ease and accessibility, a transcript of this presentation and links to all articles mentioned will be available in the presentation notes. Okay, let's get started. So to really get a grip on urban crime, we need to look at how it interacts with things like social, environmental, physical aspects of our cities. For example, back in 1995, researchers Branningham and Brinningham talked about how certain spots in cities like crime generators or attractors can actually encourage crime. This idea is super important for urban planning, keeping our streets safe, especially when you think about places like public parks that might become hotspots for crime. Now, there's also a strong connection between social issues like homelessness and crime. Studies like the one by Fisher et al. In 2008 show that homelessness, mental health, and crime are all tangled up together, painting a complex picture of how low socioeconomic status can lead to more criminal behavior, particularly in crowded urban areas. This makes it clear why we need to understand what's happening around homeless shelters and how they impact local crime. It's not just about dealing with the crime we see, but really getting to the heart of the problem. Plus, with tools like spatial analysis, researchers can now zoom in on crime hotspots and figure out the patterns of where and why crime happens. This was highlighted by Sampson, Raudenbach, and Earls in 1997 when they showed how community efforts can really help in fighting crime. Using GIS and other tech, we can track crime, see how well our urban design is working to reduce crime, and help policymakers and cops come up with strategies that prevent crime before it even starts. This kind of detailed mapping and analysis is crucial for making our community safer and improving the quality of life for everyone. My original research questions, compared to the ones listed here, refer to states of public parks. According to an article written by Andrew Morocco regarding accessibility to public restrooms and the homeless in Manhattan, the state and funding of a public park is directly correlated with the presence of public restrooms. Data retrieved from open source New York City included access to public restrooms at public parks, and thereby I had to revise my research questions. You can pause the video here and read my revised research questions before continuing. Okay, so open source New York City also included a great deal of information and data on crimes from 2017 to 2023, but I had to narrow down my research somehow. I decided to select the most prevalent and least prevalent crimes based on the malleability of data to assess. Crime data itself came from a complaint database that I filtered out to include only crimes that were fully completed, as opposed to attempted or assumed. The dataset includes detailed information on crime incidents across the city, categorized by type, location, date, and time. And so using this data from New York City, the study adopts a threefold methodological approach. Initially, geospatial data preparation involved accurate geocoding of crime incidents and integration with the state of public parks in the vicinity and adult homelessness data to then find visual correlations and hotspots of crime. Based on the summary chart of crime prevalence per borough, I chose to focus my research and study the relationships between the following. Public parks, of course, homelessness, and the following crimes: criminal trespass, arson, possession of stolen property, and rape. Additionally, I looked at the relationship between criminal mischief, dangerous drugs, also known as possession of controlled substances, robbery, and felony assaults, and how they correlate with the location of adult homeless drop-in centers. All right, so this map shows the boundaries of each of the 5 boroughs in New York City, the total homeless shelter population in each, and the locations of the only adult homeless drop-in centers in the city. Staten Island, as of December 31st, 2023, had a homeless shelter population of 291. Manhattan had a homeless population of 665. Brooklyn had a homeless population, again, these are homeless populations within the shelters, of 1,861. And the Bronx had a homeless population of 2,294. Queens had a total homeless shelter population of 6,616. Now, despite Queens having the largest homeless shelter population in 2023, Manhattan still has the largest number of drop-in centers. As you can see in this next map, the drop-in centers are fairly centralized to be nearest to the highest density of public parks, likely correlated to a similar population density of the area. According to New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, there were an estimated 3,439 individuals in New York City living on the streets and parks or on the subway on January 25th, 2022. However, this number is believed to be largely an underestimation. 2022 and 2023 saw large multi-sector attempts at making even a dent on the homeless problem, but the results were abysmal, with less than 4% of homeless personnel that were rerouted to shelters from parks remaining in the shelters for longer than one day. I've included a link to the comptroller's entire report in the presentation notes as well. In this next map, I used Morocco's distinction for the state of public parks by separating the parks with public restrooms from the parks without, as of 2023 data. The data for this was provided by the Parks Inspection Program of New York City, and this park distinction plays actually a really important role in the next few slides. And I've also included in the presentation notes a link to every public restroom in every public park in New York City. Here, I overlaid the locations of the public parks with public restrooms over top the location of the arson incidents on the left side, as you see. And then on the right side, I did a color blend to show the overlaps. As you can see, there's a substantial amount of overlap between the 2 points of data. Back in 2022, there were a series of fires set in New York City Central Park, amongst other parks, quite several parks actually, and might be a hotspot for this type of crime. For this map, I did not do a color blend because there were not enough data points for it to look any different. However, you can see a slight correlation is there. Also, due to the number and location of the incidents, I overlaid the incidents of rape over top the locations of public parks with public restrooms rather than the other way around, so the incidents would be more visible. From this map, and the previous map, there's some correlation seen between the crimes of arson and rape in the presence of public restrooms in public parks in New York City. In June 2022, there was actually a shocking incident of a rape of a Bronx woman in a local nearby park in broad daylight. And of course, we all know the historical story of the Central Park Five in the late 1980s. And there's more to it, parks and crime. However, as you can see from the maps here, correlation between incidents of possession of stolen property lies with all the public parks, not just the ones with access to public restrooms. Originally, I'd overlaid the incidents on top of the public parks with public restrooms. However, there were far more locations of incidents than there were parks, it seemed. And so I decided to try to overlay the incidents on top of all the parks, and it seemed a much better match. Likewise, the incidence of criminal trespass had a similar trend, even more closely correlated than the incidence of possession of stolen property. The incidence of criminal trespass almost exactly correlates with the locations of all the public parks in New York City. This is likely a direct result of New York City's park regulations, including a curfew for public parks. Despite a lack of gates, according to the rules, persons may enter and use the parks from 6 a.m. until 1 a.m., unless other open hours are posted at any park. This is incredibly harmful, I would say, to the homeless population in New York City specifically. I'm going to flip through these next 4 maps really quickly and then come back so we can discuss. So there's this one, this one, this one, this one. Okay, now flipping back. Okay, so a common trend we can see between these 4 maps is that high densities of crime is very close in proximity to the homeless drop-in centers, specifically in Manhattan. Criminal mischief itself is particularly high in Manhattan and some parts of the Bronx as well. The homeless drop-in centers don't actually have much correlation with the highest densities of felony assaults, but still correlate with the higher densities, just not the highest, especially in Brooklyn and the Bronx. The drop-in centers in Manhattan are very close to the highest density of possession of controlled substances, and within just a few miles of the Bronx, the same stands true. Robbery incidents correlate greatly with the location of the homeless drop-in centers in Manhattan, Bronx, and Brooklyn. It's just speculation, but if there was some sort of population analysis that went into determining the locations of the homeless drop-in centers in New York City, it definitely correlates, I would say, to the crime rates, to these crime rates, as well as the location of public parks, leading to, I guess, a rough conclusion that correlates heavily the homeless population, the location of public parks with or without public restrooms, and crime rates. All right. Limitations. Let's talk about the limitations of the study. First off, I need to recognize that the data comes from a complaint database, which means it might not cover every single crime that happened. I only looked at fully completed crimes, so anything that was attempted or assumed did not show up in the analysis. This could give us a bit of a skewed picture of what's really going on. Also, I focused on specific types of crime like criminal trespass, arson, possession of stolen property, and rape. But by doing that, I might be missing out on other important types of crime that could affect the results much differently. I chose these crimes because they were easier to work with, but it doesn't mean they're the only ones that matter. Plus, we're just looking at a few factors like public parks and homelessness. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that could be influencing crime rates, like economic inequality, cultural factors, or even how the police do their job. Ignoring these factors might not give us the full picture of what's going on. Finally, my way of analyzing the data might have its own issues. I could be missing out on patterns in the data, or making assumptions that aren't quite right. It's important to keep these limitations in mind when interpreting the results. In conclusion, this study sheds light on the intricate interplay between public parks, adult homelessness, and crime in New York City. By examining the spatial relationships and patterns of crime incidents, this study underscores the importance of considering socioeconomic, environmental, and spatial factors in urban crime analysis. The findings suggest that certain types of crimes exhibit correlations with the availability of public amenities in parks and the proximity of homeless drop-in centers, highlighting the need for targeted interventions and urban planning strategies to address crime hotspots effectively, really getting to the root of the problems. So takeaways, what do we learn? Well, crime in cities like New York is a pretty complex thing. It's not just about bad guys doing bad things. It's influenced by a whole bunch of stuff, like where parks are, who's homeless, and what's going on in the neighborhood. But the study isn't perfect. I had to work with the data available, which again might not show the full picture. Complaint databases are great, but they miss out on some crimes or only show us really part of what's happening. Also, I zoomed in on certain types of crimes and factors, and it helps spot some connections, but it's important to remember that we're just scratching the surface here. There's still a lot we don't know. We need more research to really understand what's going on. Looking at different types of crimes, talking to people in the community, and studying how things change over time can give a clearer picture of the issue at hand. At the end of the day, tackling crime means looking at the whole picture. It's not just about catching bad guys, it's about fixing the problems that lead to crime in the first place. By working together and addressing things like homelessness, which is a huge thing, and inequality, we can make our city safer and better for everyone. Well, thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions at all, please feel free to contact me at nkabi005@fiu.edu. And of course, that email is going to be included in the presentation notes. Thank you again.